Leaves from a Russian Diary. Pitirim Sorokin. Part 2. 1918. Chapter 12. In the Bosom of Nature.
Forest. Endless forest. 30 miles to the nearest village. After danger, a sensation of freedom. What happiness! Gaiety filled us and we began to sing and shout at the top of our voices. There was a hut made by peasants who, in winter, came here to hunt squirrels, bear, and other game, and in it we settled down. Above us was a roof, around us rough walls, and under us moss, dry grass, and our sleeping bags. A goodly woodpile fuel, a brook of good water. The air was healthful, and above all there was no revolution, no headhunters, no reminder of the cursed lunacy of communism. The incessantly falling autumn rain spoiled our comfort a little, but after all, very little. Time flew by. Cutting of more fuel, hunting, gathering berries and mushrooms, reading, writing, and conversation filled our time. Tired after a day of work, we slept all night like dead men. 5 days passed thus, and it was time to go to the villages for food and information. My friend knew the country better than I and had more acquaintances, so it was decided that he was to go first. We agreed that should he not return by Sunday noon, this was Thursday, I should go to look for him. Sunday noon came and my friend was still absent. I waited 3 hours and then, shouldering a few necessities, I set out. After walking 5 or 6 miles I saw a man in the path. But was it he? Yes, it was indeed, but what a figure! Clad in a shirt and nothing more. Where on earth did you leave your trousers and boots? I exclaimed.
In the river.
He answered cheerfully. Then let us be communists and divide our clothes, I said, handing him my coat, boots, and trousers, and remaining in my undergarments. The man was fairly chattering with cold. When we reached our hut he told me his adventures. In the first village he could get no food, so he crossed the river to another village, where he had a peasant friend. There they gave him supper and a bed in the bathhouse. But just as he was falling asleep he heard voices and saw men at his friend's door. He took instant flight to the wood, hoping that the men would soon leave and that he could get his bag of food, but in the morning he saw that 3 saddled horses remained at the door of the house. Stealing out of the wood, he ran along the banks of the Sokona to the place where there was a boat, but looking back he saw the Reds riding after him. At once he shed his clothes and dived into the water. They shot at him, but he reached the opposite bank without mishap. He stayed half naked in the woods until night and then started for our shelter. The exposure, excitement, and exhaustion had told on him terribly. I made a good fire to warm him and went out to seek some game, but unsuccessfully. Berries and mushrooms were all we had for supper, and berries and hot water was our breakfast. It was absolutely necessary to get food, so we started for the villages. For 3 days we nearly starved, but as safety in this neighborhood seemed now so dubious we decided to push on to Archangel. In the evening we found ourselves, soaking wet, near the village from which we had set out. In the darkness we cautiously approached the house of a relative of my companion, a peasant named Stepan, but frightened to death at our sudden appearance, he whispered.
Go away, for God's sake. Red soldiers are in the village. Go away.
He gave us some bread, a pair of bast shoes and trousers for my friend, who had walked barefoot the whole distance, and we went off with the promise from Stepan that he would bring us provisions the next day. In the wood we ravenously devoured our bread and sat down to shiver under the shower until morning.
It seems to me that we take too many baths and too few meals,
said my companion dolorously. But I reminded him that it was quite the other way with less particular people. Morning came, hour after hour passed, but no sign of Stepan. About noon we heard someone swearing at his horse, which was a conventional method of announcing the advent of provisions. 5 or 6 pounds of flour and about 100 pounds of potatoes, this was all that Stepan could bring us. Putting it in our bags, we tramped off towards our new objective, the basin of the Low Jurga. Avoiding villages, we walked for 5 hours through the rain carrying our burdens. It became quite dark. What the devil? According to our calculations, we should have reached the river 2 hours before. In our wanderings we must have lost the way. Coming to a forest hayfield, we met another disaster. My friend fell heavily and hurt his leg. As for me, I was feeling very ill. Fortunately, we found a hayrick and, too exhausted even to prepare a meager meal, we burrowed under the hay and fell asleep. In the morning, considerably refreshed, we found the river, ate breakfast, and started to go farther and farther into the wild forest, away from the hell of the glorious revolution. 5 weeks we spent moving from one place to another through this endless forest. Coming to a comparatively comfortable place, we built a sort of a shelter with hewn trees, mosses, grass, and branches. 2 tree trunks set closely together made us a fireplace. Potatoes, flour gruel, and what berries we could find formed our menu. From time to time we shot a little game, but we were obliged to hoard our ammunition lest we should need them against 2-legged beasts. We tried fishing, but it was an off-season and we had no luck. By day we kept ourselves busy, but in the evening when darkness came and we sat before the fire smoking our primitive cigarettes, we talked and thought and listened to the symphony of the forest. Composed of 1,000 varying notes, this forest music was always fascinating to me. Its pianissimo was full of strange whisperings, mysterious voices, and low, gloomy cries. In its wildest fortissimo, when all around us were creaking, crashing, whistling, booming sounds, when branches and trees fell, the music was magnificent. But what I liked most was the moderato, when the forest, as though plunged in deep meditation, softly rustled its waving branches to and fro. Our nights were full of dreams. Almost every night I saw myself walking along the streets of Archangel, of London, or Paris. I met friends, and with them ate the most delicious food. Almost all our waking hours we were hungry, our bodies, and most of all, our feet in their bark shoes, were wet. We began to bloat and to feel strangely weak and tired. All the time I was trying to observe my dreams and my sensations of starvation from the psychologist's point of view. In vain. After a few minutes of concentration I always found my thoughts wandering from the psychology of starvation to plans of getting something to eat. Sometimes our hunger and exhaustion, with our anxieties about those we loved at home, threw us into horrible despair. At other times we felt indifferent, almost happy. One day we came to a big marsh. For about 5 hours we walked through it in mud to the knees. Our bark shoes went to pieces, our feet were cut, our bodies ached, but still we came to no end of the cursed muck, no place where we could rest and eat. Everywhere we looked on a swelling, yellow-green surface with pools of open water, small and half-starved trees scattered here and there. Never shall I forget this damned moor. The water was so cold that we lost all feeling in our feet. Often we fell down and lay panting on beds of red huckleberries. There were moments when we felt that we were perishing, that the last breath of life was leaving us, and that in that red, endless expanse we must cease to breathe. Why not? Yet calling encouraging words to each other, we managed to struggle on, and at last, oh happiness, the red nightmare was over. Next day we were rewarded by coming on a hunter's hut with a rude fireplace in it. Building a fire, we took off our rags, washed them in the river, and hanging them up to dry stretched ourselves out in our Turkish bath. As we lay a wild duck flew by and lighted in the water just below us. My companion grasped the rifle and fired. The duck was shot, but the stream began to carry it away. We ran out and threw ourselves in the river after it. In this way we had a Turkish bath, a cool plunge, and a delicious duck dinner into the bargain. Afterwards we treated ourselves to a cup of hot water for tea, smoked dried leaf cigarettes, and read Jack London's stories from Alaska. We felt perfectly comfortable and happy. So we wandered. A week later messengers, who 4 times managed to bring us letters in the wilderness, came with provisions, newspapers, and a letter from some of the friends with whom we expected to reach Archangel. This letter promised us maps, without which we could hardly go on successfully, but no maps came. Later we learned that they had been sewn up in a lady's skirt and she, not knowing anything about our plans, wore the skirt and the maps to Petrograd. What to do? To obey instructions in the latest communication and to meet our friends in the place appointed, we should have to move immediately. To wait until the maps came would make us a fortnight too late. That little mistake of the lady made it impossible to go on with the Archangel party, but alas, only 2 men reached their destination. The others were captured and shot. We had about 350 miles to walk. To travel that distance without stopping at villages for food was impossible. In every village we ran great risk of arrest. To pass from one place to another it was necessary to get permission from the Communistic Committee of Poor Peasants. Bed soldiers were patrolling the forests and special pickets watched all principal vistas. We thought of retreating into the deepest depths of the forest, building a hut and remaining there all winter. We considered also hiding in a house in a village, never appearing out of doors, and never speaking except to the master of the house. It sounds fantastic, but life is more fantastic than any fiction. 2 of my friends saved their lives by that first plan and another by the second. This man lived for 2 years in a small house, never showing himself to anyone except his landlady, and in the end he escaped alive. We continued to wander over the bosom of nature, occasionally wishing we might see a little of civilization. In free moments we talked much about the revolution, and doubts which had been born in my mind at the beginning of the upheaval grew to full size. In this wild forest the utter futility of all revolution, the vanity of all socialism and communism became clear to me. The catastrophe of the revolution, the deep historic roots of Bolshevism, loathed by the majority, it is true, but having as its basis and its force the passive spirit of the Russian nation, overwhelmed me with its truth. Only when the people have suffered the fullest horrors of Bolshevism, only when they have passed completely through the tragic, perhaps the fatal experience of the communist experiment, can their dreadful sickness be cured once and forever. Only then the poisons in which Bolshevism flourished would be purged from the organism of the Russian people. Only then would this damned passivity disappear and they be transformed from a people accustomed to tyranny to a self-governing nation. Out of these meditations I wrote an address to my electors, sending it to my friends to be made public. I am no longer a revolutionist because revolution is catastrophe. I am no longer a socialist because socialism is wrong. I released myself from responsibility as a member of the Constitutional Assembly, since the people would not support their own representative body. If they hope to have a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, they themselves must be active and must cease to lean on leaders who, without their support, are powerless. Such was the essence of my message. Many dazzling illusions, beautiful dreams in whose reality I had once believed, I lost during my meditations in the forest. They fled, I believe, forever. But I did not grieve over my lost illusions. Life and the world are so beautiful, so wonderful in their reality that illusions are necessary only to the blind and deaf and lame, for mental, moral, and physical cripples. Healthy persons have no need of illusions.